The cold did not simply kill me. It dismantled me entirely. Frost crept up my spine, a suffocating, metallic grip freezing the fluid in my lungs. The freezing texture of the basement's epoxy floor offered no mercy. I clawed at the heavy steel door until my nails cracked. On the other side, Julian and my stepsister Elena laughed. They were drinking my vintage champagne, celebrating the acquisition of my mother's dowry. My vision fractured. The hydraulic hum of the estate's generator was the last sound I heard before the ice took me. And then I opened my eyes. The sharp, unadulterated scent of cedarwood and expensive lilies flooded my nostrils. My lungs expanded. No frost, no pain. I stood in the doorway of Julian's pristine study. The Persian rug beneath my heels felt impossibly soft. The date flashed on his digital desk clock. October the 4th, 3 months before the winter wedding. 3 months before the dark basement. Julian was frantically pulling his silk tie back into place, his chest heaving. Elena was scrambling off the edge of the mahogany desk, smoothing down her skirt with trembling hands. Her bright red lipstick was aggressively smeared across Julian's white collar, the exact moment I had caught them in my first life. In the past, I had screamed until my throat was raw. I had thrown a heavy crystal vase against the wall. I had begged him to explain, fighting desperately to salvage an engagement built entirely on rot. This time I didn't move. I simply watched them. It isn't what it looks like, Julian choked out, his voice a pathetic, hollow echo in the quiet room. He stepped closer, his cologne entirely too strong, a cloying mask over his own deceit. She tripped. I was just catching her. Elena forced thick crocodile tears into her eyes. Sister, please. Don't ruin this for us. We were just talking. It was a stupid mistake. I looked down at the flawless 3-carat diamond on my left hand. I slid it off my finger. The metal felt cold against my skin. I set it gently on the edge of the polished mahogany desk. Keep him, I said. My voice was a flat, empty monotone. I wish you both a very happy marriage. I turned and walked down the grand staircase, my footsteps echoing against the marble like a steady metronome. Julian chased after me, his leather shoes slipping on the polished stone. He grabbed my elbow violently. I stopped, letting my arm hang utterly limp. I did not pull away. I did not flinch. I just stared at his hand until he slowly released me, deeply unnerved by the absolute chilling void in my eyes. You're just going to leave? Julian demanded, a flicker of arrogant disbelief crossing his handsome features. Just like that? What about the corporate merger? What about your dowry? Ah, the dowry. My mother's immense liquid trust fund. The parasitic lifeblood his family desperately needed to maintain their pristine facade. Elena is my father's daughter too, I said evenly, keeping my tone perfectly calibrated, perfectly dead. She is equally entitled to a bridal fund. If she marries you, she can bring you the wealth you so clearly desire. I will speak to our father tonight. I will officially step aside. The crown is hers. Elena, who had crept to the top of the stairs to listen, gasped softly. Pure greed instantly replaced her manufactured guilt. She looked at Julian with hungry, calculated eyes. Julian sneered, regaining his arrogant composure. He smoothed his suit jacket, convinced he had broken me, convinced this was nothing more than a hysterical bluff. You'll regret this. You're throwing away a secure future with the most powerful family in the city. I am fully aware of your family's power, I replied. I offered him a single polite nod. Enjoy the engagement. I walked out the heavy front doors and into the crisp autumn air. They thought they had humiliated me. They thought they were stealing my crown. But I was just handing them the blindfold before their own execution. The truth about Julian's family, the vaunted Sterling Empire, was a meticulously buried secret. In my first life, I only discovered it days before they locked me in the dark. The Sterlings were not billionaires. They were architects of a massive illegal Ponzi scheme. Decades of phantom investments, doctored financial ledgers, and offshore laundering. They were hemorrhaging cash, desperate for a legitimate influx of capital to plug the holes, before federal investigators caught the scent. My dowry was supposed to be their ultimate salvation. Over the next 2 months, I enacted my withdrawal with absolute mechanical precision. I formally dissolved my engagement contract. My father, outraged by the public scandal, threatened to disown me. I smiled, nodded, and signed the asset relinquishment papers without reading them. I packed 2 suitcases of essential clothing and moved into a modest, leased apartment across town. Elena, meanwhile, joyfully ascended to my former throne. She flaunted the 3-carat diamond everywhere she went. She gave interviews to high society magazines about her whirlwind romance. She blindly signed every legal document the Sterlings placed in front of her, legally binding herself to Julian, to his family, and crucially, as a primary co-signer to their holding companies. She thought she was securing her elite status. She was actually assuming catastrophic liability. I spent my days quietly drinking cheap coffee in my small kitchen, listening to the heavy clank of the ancient radiator, feeling the glorious, grounded warmth of the room. I monitored the financial markets on my laptop. I watched the slight, almost imperceptible tremors in the sterling stock. I didn't need to sabotage them. I didn't need to leak documents to the press or play the righteous vigilante. I just needed to let a rapidly sinking ship pull down the rats who were so eager to board it. December the 12th, the date of their extravagant winter wedding. The exact date the FBI finally decided to stop watching and start raiding. I attended the ceremony, not to object, but to bear silent witness. I sat in the very back pew of the Grand Cathedral. The air smelled of expensive orchids and impending ruin. Elena walked down the aisle in a custom silk gown that cost more than most homes. She looked at me as she passed, a smirk of unadulterated triumph resting on her painted lips. I offered her a slow, shallow blink. The vows were exchanged. The rings were slipped onto fingers. The priest pronounced them husband and wife, permanently, legally tethering Elena to the doomed Sterling enterprise. The trap snapped shut with a resounding, invisible echo. The reception was held at the Sterling estate, the very place where a freezing basement waited below. I stood near the back terrace, a glass of sparkling water in my hand, observing the glittering, hollow spectacle. Waiters drifted through the crowd carrying silver trays of champagne. The string quartet played a sickeningly sweet rendition of a classical waltz. Then the front doors breached. It wasn't a subtle disruption. It was a tactical, overwhelming flood of federal agents in dark windbreakers. The music ground to a horrific halt. Guests screamed in terror. Agents fanned out across the ballroom in perfect synchronization, securing the exits. The lead investigator marched straight up to the head table. Julian stood up, his face instantly draining of all color. He looked like a ghost. The investigator read him his rights in a booming voice, slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. The metallic click resonated sharply through the dead silent room. Elena shrieked, her voice shrill and panicked. "What are you doing?" "Unhand my husband right now! Do you have any idea who we are?" "We know exactly who you are," Mrs. Sterling, the agent said coldly, pulling out a thick warrant. "And as a newly documented primary stakeholder and legal co-signer of Sterling Holdings, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mass embezzlement, and racketeering." Elena froze, her perfect face distorted into a mask of pure, uncomprehending horror. The agent grabbed her wrists roughly, hauling her forward in her massive, restrictive wedding dress. She thrashed wildly, her veil tearing, her eyes darting across the room until they locked onto mine. She saw me standing quietly by the terrace doors. She saw the absolute, terrifying stillness in my posture. In that final microsecond, the illusion completely shattered. She understood. She realized I hadn't been defeated. I had simply stepped out of the blast radius. "You knew." Elena screamed, her voice tearing her throat as they dragged her toward the exit. "You knew about this. You set me up." I didn't answer her. I didn't smile. I didn't feel a sudden surge of triumphant adrenaline. I just felt a beautiful, echoing emptiness. The heavy burden of my past life, the agonizing, suffocating cold of that basement, finally evaporated into the crisp evening air. Julian caught my eye as he was marched past by two agents. He looked completely pathetic, a broken, hollow shell of the arrogant heir he pretended to be. I took a slow sip of my water, the ice clinking softly against the glass. I turned away before they even made it out the door. I walked down the sweeping driveway, my heels clicking a steady rhythm against the pavement. The flashing red and blue lights painted the sprawling estate in frantic colors of emergency and doom, but I didn't look back. I had a warm apartment waiting for me and a long, quiet life left to live. Did Elena get exactly what she deserved? Or should I have let her freeze in the dark basement instead? Tell me your verdict in the comments below. If you crave more visceral stories of calculated karma and absolute rebirth, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The shadows are full of unpaid debts, and the next reckoning is already in motion.